What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett, and in today's episode, I'm going to be going over 5 prospects who I think are slightly overvalued. To kind of explain what I mean by that, I'm not going to use the term overrated. It's similar to what I did in one of my last videos of talking to the prospects with the best value. What I mean by this is the prospects who I think are maybe, they're certainly NFL caliber players. They could even be players who project to have really successful NFL careers, but do they quite fit the billing that they might have? So that's just kind of an introduction, but without further ado, let's get into the video. Before I do, if you're going to enjoy, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I post. But let's get into it. And you kind of have to start things out with the guy that is at the top of the draft. He's at the top of my draft, too. In the coming weeks, I'll probably try to put together a mock draft. That'll take some time, but hoping to get that out before draft night. That's number 1 overall pick, projected Caleb Williams out of USC. The quarterback, is he a clear number 1? Yes. Is he this generational, out-of-this-world talent that some people are billing him as? I don't think so. There's a few things that kind of stand out to me. Number 1, he didn't really impress me in a fantastic way. I know he has all the tools. He has the physical traits. He does have some of that pizzazz and the style that some I've seen even have billed him as being comparable to Patrick Mahomes. I think that obviously is a bit of a stretch, but Mahomes was not a number 1 overall draft pick coming out of college. He was a first rounder, and I think just with the tools that he had at his disposal, the coaching that he had available with Lincoln Riley as his head coach, again, maybe I'm looking too much into the wins and losses, but when you look at the record that USC had this year, 7-5 just does not impress me at all. And I think Caleb Williams, while he is, I think, deserving most likely of this number 1 overall pick, he is an NFL-ready talent who I think projects to have a successful NFL career. I just don't see him as this upper echelon, of best of the best over several years in the draft. I think honestly, Jaden Daniels has just as much, if not maybe a little bit more, of the upside, and I think he can have potentially just as good of a career. So I mean, those two are kind of interchangeable for me at the top of this draft. And Drake May is another good quarterback. I think teams should be careful. I don't want to compare him to Mitch Trubisky. He's a different quarterback and obviously one in his own right. But we've seen a North Carolina quarterback kind of pick up steam, get into the top 3 picks, like May is projected by some. Top 2 is what Trubisky was, and really not amount to having a great NFL career. So that's kind of my outlook on the quarterbacks. I think out of those 3, Jaden Daniels would actually be the one that I would most lean towards. Maybe that's because he's the most recent Heisman Trophy winner. Caleb Williams obviously won one as well, but I've been a little bit more impressed with Jaden Daniels, and maybe that's recency bias. But moving on along, coming up next is a couple of cornerbacks who were both projected to be top 20, top 15, maybe even top 10 in this year's draft. They're still likely to be first rounders, maybe very early second rounders, and that's Kaelin King out of Penn State and Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama. Again, both out of the 2022 season were projected to be these, probably the top 2 cornerbacks in the draft class. They've since been bypassed by McKinstry's teammate at Alabama, Terrion Arnold. Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo has been another guy who's kind of, shot up the draft boards ahead of both of these guys. I think at this point in the mock drafts, they are probably being fairly valued well, but just because of the fact that maybe they're as high as they are because of the seasons they had before this last one, I think their value is a little bit overvalued. I think both are probably late first round, and that is where they're being projected. So if they're drafted there, I think it matches. But why have both of these guys kind of seen some holes develop in their games, and what are those deficiencies? Well, for King, from looking over some articles and seeing some film and everything, he sometimes gets lost in zone. He allows separation off the line of scrimmage from receivers and sometimes struggles with losing his balance. For McKinstry, this one is kind of like, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? He's considered overly physical. The positive of that, obviously, is he's able to press at the line of scrimmage and not have that separation created as much. But the downside to that, of course, is penalties. And coming into the NFL, discipline is even more so than it was in college, just one of the things of utmost importance. So if you're not playing disciplined football, that's going to create a problem. And also with McKinstry, he's considered by some to maybe not have as much of that number one ceiling of being, this top cornerback, being one of the best of the best. He has what some consider to be, a very bright, I guess a very consistent future ahead of him would be the best way to put it. And so is his value of being a first round cornerback maybe a bit overvalued? I would say, again, late first round is probably suitable for Kool-Aid McKinstry, and we've seen some really good DBs and cornerbacks come out of the late first round. Then moving on ahead, and I notice these are all first round picks, and I think that's probably how it should be. If you're saying that prospects in the third or fourth round are being overvalued, I don't think that's probably accurate. But defensive end, edge rusher, Chub Robinson out of Penn State, he has elite get-off speed, and he also has the physical tools, the traits, and everything that he needs. But his problem, kind of similar to McKinstry, but obviously different style because of the position, is that he also sometimes loses his balance and can't get back. So if he's trying to rush off the edge and right away a tackle gets to him and pushes him off balance, then that play is kind of over at that point. And he's not going to have a chance to get the sack or the TFL. And on that point as well, the thing with Chub Robinson is he is more of a project than a product. And what I mean by that is his stats don't quite show the skill set and talent that he has. And I think what that means is that he just needs some more development. And so he is a guy that can be developed into a really good player. But the question is, you want your first round draft picks to be guys that plug immediately into that lineup, or maybe just take a year to kind of develop into that. You want those first round guys that you're giving up a lot of capital for to be the guys that, again, plug in immediately and make an impact. So using Chub Robinson with a top 15 pick is probably, you're giving him a lot of money and everything right up front, is probably, maybe you want to take him a little bit later in the first round and be able to develop him, not be paying him quite as much up front and be able to develop him. And then, if he develops into the player that some expect him to become, then you pay him more kind of on the end of his rookie deal and like giving him an extension, or maybe he signs with somebody else in free agency. So that's kind of my thought process on Chub Robinson. And that kind of, moving on into the final prospect that I have out of these five who I think are maybe a little bit overvalued is Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. And shout out Dynasty League Football. I'll pop up the photo of their channel and maybe kind of the landing of that. One of the things that Addison Hayes said in his video is he hits 0 out of the 16 production markers, using analytics that Dynasty League Football uses, and some of those are just the impact that a player has and statistically what they do. McConkey again hit 0 out of those 16 markers, and he's picked up a lot of steam because he had a good pro day, and I think he had a good combine as well. So he's picked up some momentum, and he's gone up the draft boards. But when you look at the productivity, I think he had under 500 receiving yards this last year. And yeah, sure, is some of that probably because Carson Beck this year was targeting Brock Bowers a good amount, some of the guys out of the backfield and the other wide receivers, sure. But I do think it shows, I think using a first round pick on McConkey is overvalued. I think it'd be better served, especially with how rich this wide receiver class is, to maybe hold on and see if maybe he's available early second round. And obviously there might be a team that does decide to take him in the first round, but again, I think that would be a little bit of a reach. Again, with all these prospects, I'm not here to say that these guys aren't NFL caliber players, that they're not deserving of being top, 40 selections, but I think, it's one of those cases of, could you get them maybe a little bit lower in the draft? I think these are the guys who maybe you could. Caleb Williams, again, I think if you're looking for that generational quarterback, just kind of rounding my thoughts here, I'm willing to be proven wrong. I'm not here to take shots at the guy. I think he's a phenomenal player and a great person, but is he, that generational, like you have to have that number one pick to take him? Maybe not. And then some of these other guys is probably, you could let them drop a little bit further down and get them for better value. But let me know your thoughts below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me. Comment your players who you think are a little bit overvalued, who are the guys that are projected high and you think maybe should be a little bit lower. But if you watched to this point in the video, thank you so much for taking the time to watch College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.